Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone. This is the Apostate Prophet. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I'm here with someone that we all waited very long for, which is no other than David Wood. David, why don't you just introduce yourself?
Hi, David Wood. How y'all doing?
Well, for those who don't know David Wood, he has his own channel, which is called Act 17 Apologetics, and he's been doing quite a great job over there with around 260,000 subscribers right now, I think, with a very big reach, talking about Islam, mainly all the problems around Islam, while also defending against some other groups that we will also talk about. David, I think it would be best if you just started by introducing your own channel, your activities, what you are aiming to do, and so on.
Well, I have a Christian apologetics channel, so kind of for those of you who don't know, apologetics a lot of people have a negative view of apologetics nowadays, but apologetics it comes from a Greek word apologia, which means give a defense, so, which refers to a court defense where the prosecution would bring forth its charges, and then the defense would get up and speak and say, here's my response to the charges against my client here. And that response was called an apologia. So apologetics is just giving a response to objections or giving a defense of what you believe. So basically everyone who defends their position on any issue is doing a kind of apologetics. But I tend to focus a lot on Islam. Just a lot of my friends over the years were Muslims. I ended up dealing with Islam quite a bit, and I kind of stuck with Islam because there's not enough people dealing with it. You're talking about like a fifth of the world's population, and not a lot of people deal with it. So yeah, that's basically what I do on my channel.
All right. Would you say that this apologetics, I mean, the main reason behind it, the main motivator in the beginning was it just to strengthen your position on Christianity, or was it mainly a response to Islam? I have seen that you included a lot of discussions with atheists too. What was the main motivator behind that?
Well, that's how I became a Christian. So my background was atheism. So I became a Christian after looking into some of the main art. Well, I actually thought I was coming up with these arguments. Later, I found out that people had been using these arguments for centuries, but I thought I was coming up with the arguments as I was studying Christianity back when I was 19 and 20 years old. So back then, I didn't even know what apologetics was. I was just I ended up studying it, and I was studying apologetics books, not realize I just thought I was reading books about Christianity, and then. Yeah, I eventually started, kind of focusing on it. That's just what was interesting to me. In college, I did philosophy, and apologetics is kind of like very closely related to philosophy. So lots of Christian philosophers are also apologists.
Yeah, I saw your video about your background, your testimony about how you were an atheist and how you became a Christian afterwards. Could you? I think it was very brilliantly done. It was very interesting. Could you summarize it? I mean, how did that? What exactly went through your head? What did you learn and unlearn until you arrived there? How did you exactly doubt everything, become a Christian, and then start talking about it?
You talking about the subway video?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that was cool. We got that one take first try. That was it. We started recording and walked through the station and got it all. I was assuming something went disastrously wrong until we watched it. I was like, hey, it looked like we got everything.
That's what I would be afraid of.
Well, people don't know that when I got to the point where I was walking down in this long tunnel, there were a crowd started gathering and following us. And one of my friends who was walking behind the cameraman was sort of holding people back, because you're walking by and someone's saying all this crazy, insane stuff, and there's a camera following him, and people just started following us and stuff. And so that was so distracting. I'm looking at the camera, but there's all these people here, and they didn't hear what I was saying before, and they're not going to hear what I say later. So all they're hearing is all this insane stuff, and it was very distracting. So I don't know if I was coherent at all. But it worked out okay. Yeah. So Basically, yeah, I grew up as, I don't remember when I officially declared myself to be an atheist. I remember certainly by 14 in my mind, I hadn't said anything to like my family or anything, but by the age of 14, I was officially like, okay, atheism is my position. But I don't remember believing in God before that either. But anyway, that's how I grew up. But unlike most atheists, I had some mental health issues, which if you don't end up seeing a psychiatrist, then no one explains to you that, hey, we know what this is, and we know why this is a problem, and you're not the only one with this problem. There are other people who have this problem, and we could talk to you about your problem. If you don't have a psychiatrist telling you, explaining things, then you're kind of trying to figure it out yourself, and you can end up making some big mistakes along the way trying to figure out what's going on inside your head. So anyway, I grew up as an atheist, and sort of on the nastier end, in terms of I wasn't just an atheist. I like really despised people. I thought were like disgusting accidents, right? And it was like offensive to me to think that we're actually important when you've got this huge universe and we're these just insignificant little blobs of cells, thinking everything we do is important. No, I didn't see the problem. I didn't see the contradiction between that belief, namely that things are meaningless and everything is really pointless, and no matter what we do, if you spend your entire life helping people, you haven't really changed anything in the big scheme of things. From, if you were an axe murderer, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Not noticing the planet is going to exist long after we've gone extinct. So what is all, what's it all matter here? So I didn't notice the contradiction between believing that and eventually concluding that I'm the most important, greatest human being, and the next level of humanity. And the way I came to that was going back really, really far. I talked about this a little in that testimony video, but the first time it hit me, I don't remember if I was 5 or 6, but my dog died, and my mom was crying over my dog when she hated my dog, and I hated her cat, but I liked my dog, and when my dog died, got hit by a bus, I was thinking, so what? It's just a dog. Why is she getting teary-eyed over this? And then over time, I saw other people get sad when something dies, when their pet dies, when their dad or mom die or something like this. I saw that people get upset over these things, and I really couldn't understand. I mean, and if you think about it, emotions aside, if you think about it, why would you get upset over someone dying? Yeah, you're never going to see them again or something like that, but did you expect that they were going to live forever? Hey, this is going to happen with every single person in your life, apart from you dying before that, right? That's what were you expecting here? So it's on a rational level that made perfect sense, but it did tend to bother people. So I thought there was something wrong with people, and eventually trying to get a time frame in my mind, because I can remember actually thinking certain things in certain spots, like in a classroom or something like this. But I believe I was about 10th to 11th grade. I started coming to conclude that that I was a new level in humanity. Like, these emotions, these feelings, things like remorse, guilt, concern for other people, they had their place. They helped the herd survive for thousands of years, and now, well, they're kind of obsolete. And so I've evolved to a new level of humanity where these things are no longer necessary. And so if you start thinking like that, well, then you conclude that you're the best, most important person in the history of humanity. And the reason I say that's a contradiction is, if we are really meaningless blobs of cells and nothing we really do matters, well, guess what? Nothing I could ever do would matter as well. But I was still a couple of years away from spotting the contradiction there. Did you want to?
Can you relate now much better to that, what you didn't understand about people being sad about such losses?
Well,
I mean, loss of life, for example.
Well, the difference is now I regard myself as defective, right? Like now I regard myself as there's something wrong with me. So before I was thinking, oh, there's something wrong with you all, and I'm the superior one here. I'm the one. I've got some ability that you all lack. I've got the ability to just respond rationally and logically when things happen. You guys don't have that ability. Whereas now I regard it as, okay, you guys are the normal ones. I'm defective somehow. There's a part of my brain that doesn't work. Like, you could be born blind, you could be born deaf, you could be born autistic, you could be born with all sorts of things that would set you apart from other people. But now I would regard it as I'm defective. So if someone else is having an emotional reaction to something, yes, I don't think that, oh, you're weak or defective in some way. I think, okay, if I'm not responding in the same way, there's something wrong with me here.
Yeah. What about the beginning? I mean, I'm stuck at one point. You said that you didn't know, or you don't know when actually you started to call yourself an atheist. But what about the background of your upbringing? What about your parents? I mean, were you taught about life outside of this, about God, about Christianity, and this and that, or didn't you have any such education in your childhood at all, and that's why you ended up being an atheist?
Come from a pretty rough background. people don't. Occasionally, I'll mention it, but I'll give you some examples because I talk. In my video, I talk about my dad and stuff like this. And but when I was born, my dad was at that time a drug dealer. I just found this out recently because my dad talked about when he started straightening out, because he used to sell like weed and this is before like crack became huge and stuff. But it was just weed, acid, and pills, stuff like this. But he was apparently living pretty large, and they would take trips to Mexico and then come back. And he eventually got caught for the second time when they raided his place. And he was only 17. He was 17. They raided his place, and he told me that he got caught with 6 pounds of marijuana that he brought back. This was only like a month ago. I was talking to my mom, and I said, "Hey, you tell me the story of that time when Dad got caught with the 6 pounds." She goes, "6? More like 60. So I was talking to Mom, and then she told me the whole story there. But at that time, my mom was 15, and she was on probation for an arson attack on a cop's house and shooting into the house, which someone shot into the house with a shotgun, and it hit a baby in the leg. Right, oh. So the baby survived and stuff, but got hit in the leg. To be clear, my mom wasn't doing any of that. She's just with
I get it.
She's with the people who are doing it. So she's on probation when she's pregnant with me, and police storm my dad's apartment. And anyway, she told me about her trying to hold the door closed while my dad shoves all the drugs down the heating vent and stuff like that. And so anyway, that was that background. And Mom and Dad didn't last, and I kind of ended up going back and forth between them for years. So never really got to settle down in one particular place, because mom would sometimes move like 3 times in a year. So jumping around place to place. And then I would be going back and forth between her and live with my dad in a different state. So never really had a lot of stability, but I would go. So neither one of them seemed to care. If you asked either one of them, hey, do you actually believe in God? Do you actually believe in Jesus? They would have said yes, but it wasn't a big, like my dad used to say, he's God. If people would say, oh my God, he'd go, yes, what do you need? So Dad was kind of a blasphemer. Mom wasn't a big issue. So the only time I would ever go to church or anything would be with my grandma, when I would stay with my grandma. And so my grandma it was like the worst time the worst time ever. It was this Episcopalian church in Morgantown, West Virginia, which they're perfectly nice, but you're a kid and they're just boring you out of your mind. They don't even give like sermons like that you could understand. It's not quite like Gregorian chanting and stuff like this, but it's the sermons were more of recitations and chanting. And so I would just sit on the edge of this pew and stare at this clock beside me. I would always sit beside the clock, so I would know how much time I had to live through this. And at the end was cool, because as soon as they ended it, I would bolt downstairs, because there were always like brownies and donuts down there. So that was the good part. But yeah, so that was the background. As far as again, it's at 14 where I can actually remember affirming myself as an atheist, and I was probably maybe 15 or 16 when I told my other family members except for my grandma, and no one else would let me tell my grandma because they were like, you're gonna break her old heart there with this stuff. So yeah.
So later you came to Christianity. I believe, as far as I remember, that was in prison, right?
That was in jail. For those who don't know the difference, jail is like when you're going to court and they have you more locally, and then when they send you to a place on a more permanent basis, they send you to prison. So yeah, I went to jail for attacking my dad with a hammer, and so I attacked my dad with a hammer and left him for dead. He actually survived, so I wasn't charged with murder. I was charged with, it's what's called malicious wounding. It's you do damage to someone attempting to disfigure them or kill them. And so I was charged with malicious wounding, was found guilty, went to jail. And in the jail, I met this Christian named Randy who was in there. He had turned himself in for 21 felonies. This is a guy who grew up, was doing, lots of stupid stuff, and became a Christian eventually, joined the military, and he was out on a boat somewhere and decided that he was going to go turn himself in for everything he had done. So he's sitting here in this jail cell, and not a cell, this was a dorm. And I started up a discussion with him one day. Because I noticed he wouldn't watch the fights, right? This was the only thing interesting to do in this dorm, was watch fights that happened like every day. And this was 3E, the dorm, and they called us the bang block because they would, like, every day they were hauling people out of there on stretchers from all the fighting in there. And I noticed this one Christian guy who wouldn't look. He wouldn't even look over at the fight when it's going on. And so anyway, seemed like an interesting fellow. But one day he was up there reading his Bible, and I walked up to him and I said, this is what I said, this because this is what I thought when I was growing up. I said, hey, you know why you're reading the Bible? You're reading your Bible because you're born in the United States. If you'd been born anywhere else, you believe in something else. If you've been born in China, you'd be a Buddhist. If you've been born in India, you'd be a Hindu. If you've been born in Saudi Arabia, you'd be a Muslim, because people like you believe whatever you're taught to believe. And I'd said similar things to Christians before, because that's how it seems, right? But you got Muslims over there, you've got Buddhists over there, you've got Hindus over here. Why do you grow up and believe in Christianity?
But that's the most basic thing that you think when you look at a map of religious distribution around the world. Yeah.
And so that makes perfect sense to you, and you want to help this Christian guy realize why he actually believes something. It's not because it's true; it's because he was just raised in an area where that happens to be the popular view. And so what happened was, this guy actually put up a fight. That was the difference right there. I had been saying things like that to Christians for couple years at this point, where I was becoming more vocal. If it was usually just friends and stuff. Hey, why do you really believe this? But never really got a response from Christians. My grandma was the first person to actually ever give me anything that actually looked like an argument. She was an operating room technician, and she was just showing her. She just looked at her hand one day and she goes, "If you think about how complex and sophisticated something like the hand is, just the hand, and that as soon as you think something, you can do it and stuff, and how difficult it would be for an engineer to come up with anything remotely like this. I mean, it's just amazing." I was like, okay, well, I see your point. I don't agree with it, but I see that you actually have there's a point there to be made. But that was that was the closest I ever got to an argument from a Christian. And Randy was he wasn't giving me piles of evidence. He would make arguments because he'd studied a little apologetics, but it was more him questioning things that I would say, because for some reason, when people make claims, we tend to think that this person knows what they're talking about, if we don't know that they're wrong, right? So in other words, if you're hanging out with your friends and your friends make some claim, did you know in 1452, blah, 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 people think, oh, this person knows what he's talking about, when it could be complete nonsense. And so Randy would just, hey, where'd you get that? Oh, why do you think that? Or I would say something and go, really? And he kept asking me, probing me further. And it started clicking to me that I hadn't really been given a case for anything I was saying. I had just absorbed it from somewhere. So for instance, if I were saying, oh, come on, all scientists agree that life can form on its own with no problem. If you just had enough time and the right molecules, you can get that sort of thing. Weird stuff happens. I would say something like that. And he would go, really? All scientists? And, it would cross my mind. I have no idea what all scientists believe. I haven't polled all scientists. I haven't been shown polls of all scientists. I'm just blurting this out in the discussion. And so he would he kept doing that. And it made me start thinking, where am I actually getting these beliefs, right? Like about the origin of life or about the universe. Where am I getting these beliefs? And it started occurring to me that I just kind of picked them up over time without you. This is the problem that Descartes noticed that he brings up in the Meditations, that you can think of it like Secret Service, right? So think of it in terms of Secret Service protecting the president. If the president's speaking somewhere and the Secret Service is checking people as they go into this speaking event, and Secret Service is putting people through metal detectors and they're checking them. If they're doing that, and all of a sudden at this rally, someone pulls out an AK-47 in the audience, that doesn't just tell you that this person with the AK-47 is a threat. This tells you that anyone might be a threat, because your method of checking people who are going into this event is flawed. It's somehow flawed. If someone got through your defenses, your security measures with an AK-47, then your method is flawed. For all you know, every person in there has an AK-47. And beliefs are kind of like this. If you're letting beliefs into your head and not checking them properly, which when we're young, no one's checking things properly. No one, not Christians, not Muslims, not atheists. No one is checking things properly.
Most of them don't. Yeah, most of them, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've never met a kid who has a properly functioning system in place for making sure that no false beliefs get into his head. But it's once you start thinking, hey, did I really investigate that before I believed it? Did I really investigate that before I believed it? And then it becomes, oh no, I could be wrong about pretty much everything, up to and including my entire world view here. And what that really did is it made me want to start studying more, because I still thought I was right. I may have picked up some things along the way that I didn't properly investigate, but I still believe that upon investigating them, I would find out that I'm right. And so Randy and we eventually got into the only fasting battle that I've ever heard of, where he would fast a certain number of days. And he said, look, when I get out of here, I'm not going to have the opportunity to fast for 7 or 10 days at a time. So I'm going to fast as much as I can while I have the opportunity. And so I was shocked. I never seen anyone fast before. And this guy went 7 days on nothing but water. And so I was watching that and watching this guy, and he's giving me his trays every day. So they bring him meal trays and he gives them to me, because we become friends over time, having discussions. And I started thinking, I have to be stronger than this Christian. I have to be mentally stronger than this Christian. If I'm this great person that I think I am, I have to be a tougher, stronger person than this Christian. And so he went 7 days, and I'd never fasted before in my life, but I went 10 days, nothing but water. The first fast I ever did. And then I ate for like 2 or 3 days, and then I did another 10-day fast just to rub it in. And so anyway, we kept going back and forth, and he would fast a certain number of days, and I would fast a certain number of days.
And eventually he took you on his side.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that guy went 40 days eventually. He went 32 days on nothing but water, and then he started drinking Kool-Aid, and then he made it to 40 days. And so that was very impressive. He told me that Jesus had done it. So I said, all right, I'm going 42. And so I was going to go an even 6 weeks. And what's stupid is this is just to beat a Christian, right? I'm trying to beat a Christian here. Whatever he does, I have to be able to outdo him. And so I was on. I forget what day I was on when I passed out in front of the guards. I needed some form, and the guard said he had one, and so I stood up and passed out and busted my head in the dorm there. And a guy, Jeff, told me because I woke up and everyone's like looking down at me, and Jeff said I got up and was walking towards the guard, and I stopped, and he said, then it looked like you were a snake standing on its tail, and then boom, you just went straight down. But so the guard started looking into things there, and I was on the 11th day, and that's when they looked into my mental health history and concluded that maybe I'm trying to kill myself because I'm not all there. And so they stuck me in a camera cell. That's where you're in a little cell, but you have a camera pointed at you all the time. So you have someone monitoring you to make sure you don't, hang yourself or do anything else stupid. Mm-hmm. So it was back there, and I got back there, and I thought, this is a good time to study. You have a cool library. You can get any books you want from the library. They'll bring them by. So
how long did you do that? How long did you study there?
Where in that cell?
Yeah.
At least several months, because I kept going back and forth where I would fast a certain amount of time, and then I would give up, and then I would think that I was weak for deciding to eat again, and so I would go back. So I was doing that for a while, but I mean, back then I was reading the dialogues of Plato, the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. Epictetus was my favorite. Epictetus was one of the last of the great Stoic philosophers, but that guy was a slave who his master had beaten him so severely as he was disabled. He was permanently disabled, and eventually got his freedom and went off and started his own philosophy school. But Stoicism is great if you're a diagnosed psychopath. You ever want to help a psychopath, share some Stoicism with him, because the Stoics are all, you have to do things out of a sense of duty. You have to do the right thing out of a sense of duty. Screw your feelings. Your feelings are irrelevant. Your feelings are only going to hinder you. Do things out of a sense of duty. And a psychopath is capable of doing that, right? You're not going to get anywhere if you start saying, be more compassionate. They can't. That part of their brain doesn't work. But you can show them that they can do the right thing without having those feelings. Anyway, so I was reading those things, but also reading. I was going through these Bible studies I got from the chaplain. Some of the they were like science books that Randy gave me, which, looking back on it now, I know that they were apologetics books and so on. But glancing through them and so on, and anyway, that's what I was studying back then.
How did you come to? Okay, you went to Christianity from there. Mm-hmm. How did you get exactly from there to focusing on Islam, to criticizing Islam, to creating this YouTube channel about Islam? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, so in the cell there, yeah, I eventually, and people can go watch that video referring to if they want more on that, but came across a kind of design argument, a kind of moral argument, and then Jesus' resurrection, which made me rethink everything. And eventually at that point, I was just thinking, all right, what have I got to lose here? If I believe in Christianity and it turns out to be false, then at least I'll know it. So started with that a little bit later. Once I started actually studying apologetics and knowing what it was, I was just completely interested in responses to atheist arguments. So things like the problem of evil or arguments for the existence of God. That's all I was really interested in. So had no interest in Islam. But as many people know, there are Muslim groups in prisons, and in the prison I was at, Muslims were not like a main group. It was more offshoots. So the main group, as far as anything associated with Islam, is called the 5% Nation of Islam. So the Nation of Islam is an American racist offshoot of Islam, and the 5% is a more radical offshoot of them, but that was like the dominant. That's probably the dominant group, but apart from Christians, it was 5%ers in prisons in Virginia.
I wouldn't even call them really Islam. Would you?
No, no. They would get killed in a Muslim country.
Yeah.
The 5%ers say that basically the black man is God and the white man is the devil. And the white man was created when a two-brained scientist named Yaqub grafted the skin of a pig on a person and made the white man and stuff like this. So anyway, yeah, they have and they would speak in this language that they think people couldn't figure out, but we all figured it out. So we would all know what their code language was. So anyway, it was 5%ers in there. Muslims weren't a terribly big group, but later I became friends with the imam among the inmates. So his name was Anthony. And now Anthony, I don't think I've ever said a lot of this, by the way, but Anthony Barnhill, you can if you look up crimes in the 90s, you can go back and find this dude. But Anthony had shot a pastor and stabbed his wife.
Whoa.
No, this is before he was a Muslim. So he wasn't a Muslim when he did this. He converted to Islam in either in jail or in prison. But he was pretty cool, pretty smart guy when I started having discussions with him. And anyway, we became like weightlifting partners. So we would go and lift weights and argue about Christianity and Islam. And for again, there's a lot of new information for people who even if you watched my videos before, I'm not sure I talked about this, but back then there was a Christian bulletin board. Each of the religious groups, 5%ers didn't have one, but Christians had their own bulletin board in the cafeteria, and Muslims had a bulletin board, and there were a couple other groups that had their bulletin boards. But we had one that was right where people stood in line to get your meal. There was a bulletin board there, and something happened where a guy named Satterwhite, who was one of the coolest Christians I've ever met in my life, he's a former Nation of Islam member. So he grew up in the Nation of Islam and then eventually became a Christian, and super cool, super nice. But he just put a note that was like, the top of a sheet of paper, and he just wrote in pen on there, there are many false paths, but then there's, the true path to Christianity, and not, he said something about the other false paths, and he mentioned Islam on there. And like 8 Muslims surrounded him on the recreation field, and they surrounded him. They're like, "Hey, why you put that up on the bulletin board?" And he said, he's like, "Oh, and just stating what I believe." And they're like, "No, you're trying to start a problem here." And so they basically surrounded him and intimidated him, and he took it down. And so anyway, I really didn't like. I mean, it wouldn't have mattered that they were Muslims. It could have been anyone. If you surround someone 8 or 9 on one or something like this and tell them to do something, instead of just, they could have walked up to him and just said, "Hey, why don't you take that down? Some guys don't like it," or something like that. The fact that they surrounded him on the ball field where they're, it's looking like they're about to pound his face in if he doesn't do what they want, it kind of ticked me off. So I went to Satterwhite and I said, I don't like what they did there. Why don't you put me in charge of that bulletin board? Like, and then I'll put something up, and then if they come bother you, then tell them to come to me. And so he did that, and I made this giant serpent head. It's kind of messed up. So I made this giant snake head, and it was coming out of the side of the bulletin board, and he had a word bubble beside him, and it said, "Hiss, Jesus was just a prophet. Trust me," right? And so
I see.
And so at this point, I don't know anything about Islam. I don't care about Islam. I mess with people who mess with other people, right? If you're trying to bully someone, then I'm gonna mess with you. And so Satterwhite walks up to me and he says, "Oh, so they came up to me over that sign." I said, "Did you tell them that I put it up?" He goes, "Yeah, I told them." And so I'm thinking, okay, any day I'm about to get surrounded by these guys, and they never came, right? They never came and messed with me. Instead, I got called into the warden's office, and the warden said, I received several complaints about this sign you put up attacking Islam. And I was like, oh, okay. So he goes, I want you to take that down. And I go, okay, all right, I'll take it down, sir. That sign will never appear again. Now, for people who don't understand prison culture, the worst thing you can possibly do is go to the authorities, right? That's like worse than a child molester in prison. Someone who goes and complains to the police about stuff that another inmate. That's snitching. That's called snitching, right? You're going to the authorities over something that an inmate is doing. So anyway, so I put up a big sign and I said, members of a certain religious group were upset about our character, Zach the Serpent, and him saying that Jesus was just a prophet. What these members of this religious group don't know is that if you have a problem with what another inmate does, you should go to that inmate and not go to the warden, right? So I basically called them all snitches. And what was cool there was some of the you had different kind of inmates. You had like new young inmates who don't understand the rules when they come in, and you have like older inmates, the old heads. Even the older Muslims were like, "Nah, he's right. He's right. You should not have gone to the warden over this." So there were some cool older Muslims who were saying, "This guy's absolutely right. You guys should never have gone to the warden about this stuff." And so basically, I called them all snitches, and now they're really enraged. And I'm thinking every day, I'm thinking, okay, now they're just going to clock me, right? Because they have to restore their prison honor here. And so I'm walking around every day thinking, when are these guys going to clock me? And they never did. And I found out from my bunkmate who heard it from one of the Muslims. He said, our imam told us not to go near the guy, right? So my friend Anthony Barnes, and it wasn't that he was trying to protect me. We'd had so many discussions on Christianity and Islam, which back then, I hadn't read the Quran, I hadn't read the Hadith, but he would give me arguments, and I would go look them up, and I would go back, and I would say, hey, this is a stupid argument here that you're using. And he would give me tracts, and I would go look up the tracts. It was actually cool. He had good qualities. He gave some tracts that were giving these really bad Islamic arguments against Christianity. And I would go up to him and I would say, hey, it says that the Hebrew for this word means this and stuff. Look, here's the Hebrew right here. Here's the dictionary. This doesn't mean what your tract says it means. And they would stop giving out those. He would stop giving out those tracts and stuff. So that was cool. But what he was worried about was me like leading them astray. And like if we actually got into it, if they came up to me, we actually ended up getting into a discussion. He was worried that their faith would be hurt by the discussion. So he told them to stay away from me. And what it ended up doing was I just kind of ended up with a free pass to go around doing things that would have gotten other people hurt at some point.
When did you start actually going into studying Islam?
Yeah, so at that point, I mean, the only book I read before meeting Nabeel in college, the only book I read was Answering Islam by Norm Geisler and Abdul Salim. By the way, awesome book. But by the time I met Nabeel, that was the extent of my research on Islam, was that book. And Islam will sometimes appear as a minor topic in other apologetics books, but hadn't read the Muslim sources. And so I got out of prison a few years after that and went to college. And there in college, on the speech and debate team, I met a Muslim named Nabeel. And someone named Nabeel, that doesn't tell you a lot about how much of a Muslim he is. Suggests that he has a Muslim background, and his last name Qureshi. That means like from the Qureshi tribe. So I wasn't sure how devout he was, but we ended up on the speech and debate team. Ended up sharing a hotel room, and turns out he took Islam very seriously and started challenging me. And the first discussion we had, I let him go hours explaining his beliefs. So I would ask him, what do you believe about God? What do you believe about Jesus? What do you believe about the Bible? What do you believe about the Quran? And he would explain his beliefs. And after several hours, I said, all right, I got one more question. If you're wrong, do you want to know it? Because some people, you ask that and they say no. And no offense, atheists, but it's usually atheists who say that, right? And it's usually I'll say, oh, if you're wrong about God, you want to know it. And they've said, and I've had lots of atheists just say no. I would rather be wrong than believe in your God, or something like that. But Nabeel said yes and no. He said, yes, I would want to know the truth about God, but no, it would destroy my family. And that was interesting to me because, apart from my grandmother, my family wouldn't have cared much at all about what I believed, as long as I was staying out of trouble and not getting locked up. So the fact that what his family believes is a role in whether he wants to know the truth about something, that was pretty new.
That's the case with pretty much every Muslim around the world, especially in the Islamic world.
Yeah, and there are places where it would be true of Christians, and Christians who have very devout families and so on. That would be true of some Christian families, but with Muslims, it's on another level. Like, it's pretty rare for a Christian family to shun. They have to be some really, really diehard Christians who actually shun a child for not, for leaving Christianity or becoming an atheist or something like that. But very common among Muslims. And I've heard from lots of people, hey, I told my parents that I was no longer a Muslim, and they told me, don't come back here until you're a Muslim again.
Yeah, that's what many people don't understand, who are like against all religions equally, which is never all religions equally, by the way. But among Christians, we see all the time that people have stopped believing in Christianity and start criticizing and start talking negatively about it, and they even, many of them even try to equate Christianity and Islam as if they were kind of this on the same level evil or something like that. But if you just look at former Muslims, pretty much every former Muslim has a problem with their family because they left Islam. They can't tell their families. They don't even feel safe if they tell their families, or their families will just completely stop supporting them, will throw them out, tell them to go away. While most former Christians don't have that problem at all. In fact, I haven't met any former Christian who has a problem now with their family because he left the faith.
Yeah, and one also common thing is that there will be a period of if you leave Islam, there are families who will take some time and try to convince you to return to Islam. So that's what Nabeel's dad did when he eventually left Islam. He spent about a year taking him to various Muslim scholars to try and convince him that Islam is true. But that is an amazing degree of psychological pressure when you understand that, hey, if I change my belief about this, then my family, and I don't just mean mom and dad or my sister, it's just like cousins, aunts, uncles, if they do continue having a relationship with me, the relationship is going to be very, very strained. I'm going to be regarded as a disappointment to them, an embarrassment. It's going to be humiliation for them at the mosque. You're the parents with the kid who left Islam, and it's going to bring a great deal of shame on my family. And if you're a good kid, that affects you, right? Unless your parents were total jerks, you don't want to hurt your family. You don't want to put them through that. And so it plays a role. And I got to watch that play out for years with Nabeel. It was always that. It was him. He would look at the argument and try to get to the bottom of the argument and respond to objections and so on. But at the same time, you always saw the psychological pressure that his love for his family.
How did it end up? I mean, did he in the end still have problems with his family because of that, or did they make peace?
Yeah, well, his dad used to, again, take him around to mosques and so on, trying to convince him back. And then for a while, it was just like really, really intense arguing every time he would talk. I was hanging out with him one day, and he got into an argument with his parents on the phone, and it went like, I don't know, 90 minutes or so, and it was like World War III on the phone. And he finished, and I'm thinking, gosh, that's like the worst stuff ever. And he goes, "This is every time we talk now."
Wow,
man. And so, to be fair, he would kind of poke them. His mom was showing him this picture of this like beautiful Pakistani girl, and said, I can arrange a marriage with her if you return to Islam. And he goes, "So if I return to Islam, you can arrange a marriage with 4 of them." So that would upset her. So But eventually, and I think it was mainly when he had a daughter. He had a daughter named Aya, and the third generations usually help smooth things over, because even though you can be mad about what your son did, you're going to love your granddaughter. So that they tended to smooth things out after that, in terms of, let's just have a truce while we're together and stuff. And so his family got along with him after that. But Nabeel was the one who got me studying the Muslim sources, and it would be to respond to his arguments, because he would be giving his arguments based on Muhammad's miraculous scientific insights, but he wouldn't just be using the Quran. Most Muslims point to passages in the Quran which are supposedly miraculous scientific insights, but he's pointing to things that Muhammad would say, and that Muhammad couldn't have been aware of these things. And Muhammad is making these predictions of things that were happening that wouldn't happen for more than 1,000 years into the future. And so it's amazing prophetic knowledge about how things would turn out. And so the only way to really look into those is to get the sources. And so that's when I started buying Sahih Muslim and Sahih al-Bukhari and stuff like that. The first thing I did when I wanted to start looking into the life of Muhammad was I looked up what's the earliest source on the life of Muhammad, and it was Ibn Ishaq. So it's Ibn Ishaq's Sirat Rasulullah. Mm-hmm. So I got that and started reading, but then I would bring passages to Nabeel, and I would say, hey, this contradicts what you were saying about your prophet. Look at this. And then he said, no, you can't go to Ibn Ishaq. You have to go to the major hadith collections, which was confusing to me, right? It's like, wait, if you're not trusting things, you can't know more later than you did earlier, right? You can't know more 2 centuries later than you could a century later.
Absolutely.
And so there's a problem. And if the guys who are writing a century after the events have been corrupted, well, guess what? They're the guys filtering information for guys in the following century. So you've got a problem here. But he was convinced that people like Bukhari and Muslim had a superior methodology, because they had isnad criticism and the standard methods, which back then when Ibn Ishaq was writing this wasn't, the methodology wasn't standardized yet. So you had a variety of different methods competing for how you do Islamic history. Later, the hadith collectors convinced people that they had the correct way of doing Islamic history. And by the time you get down to today, there are Muslims who will say that's the only way to do history, even though it's like the silliest method I've ever seen for doing history ever.
Did you see a difference between Nabeel's way of looking at his own religion and the mainstream religion? I mean, I'm asking this because many people, especially Muslim apologists online, will tell you things like, well, Nabeel was Ahmadi, which doesn't count as Muslim, so he's not practically an ex-Muslim, and stuff like that. How do you think, was he different from other Muslims? Was that really the case?
No, and unless he would refer to his sect or to his sect being persecuted. But when we're having discussions, he's arguing that the Quran is the word of God, and that Muhammad is Allah's prophet, and they view Mirza Ghulam Ahmed as what they call the promised Messiah. So, by the way, for people who don't know, because people compare Ahmadis to Islam in the sense that Mormons are to Christianity, but no, there's a huge difference there. If you're a Mormon, you have fundamental differences on a number of core Christian doctrines that you would have to discuss. Ahmadis believe in a different view of end times, right? So all Muslims believe in someone coming after Muhammad. They believe in the return of Jesus. You have to, as a Muslim, believe that Jesus is returning. Well, Ahmadis just believe that it already happened. I think it's silly. I think it's a silly belief. But they still believe in all 5 pillars. They still believe in the 6 articles of faith. They still believe in all the basics of Islam. They have a different view of end times, and it does affect their interpretations, because now you have the interpretations of the promised Messiah. And so if he says this Quran verse means such and such, then you are kind of bound by that interpretation as an Ahmadi. But in terms of the way Nabeel argued, I can't think of any way that Nabeel's arguing was different from your average Muslim apologist today. He's still arguing perfect preservation of the Quran. He's arguing scientific miracles in the Quran and in the life of Muhammad. He's arguing that Muhammad is the greatest man who's ever lived. So well, there is a slight difference when it comes to objections to Christianity, because Ahmadis believe that Jesus was put on a cross, but that he survived.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but you even find other Muslims who hold that position.
One thing I notice about Ahmadi is that that many of them interpret problematic Quran verses in a different way to make it kind of, softer, like the verse 34 in chapter 4 about the wife beating, for example. I saw that many Ahmadi sources interpret that as something different than wife beating, and that there is somehow a consensus among Ahmadis about that.
Well, again, if the promised Messiah or one of his successors gives you that interpretation, then you're not in much of a position to object. So they do have cult-like qualities in that sense, in terms of you have a central authority in your religion that you are bound to adhere to. So there was that. But as far as the arguments that he was using, standard Islamic apologetics. And so anyway, that's how I started studying the Muslim sources. It wasn't because I had any tremendous interest in Islam. Again, I was more interested in the objections of atheists. I was more interested in philosophy. I was more interested in almost anything than Islam. It was just when I had a Muslim friend, I would study Islam. And so, but Nabeel's he's pushing all kinds of arguments, which, by the way, this is why certain arguments against Islam, certain arguments for Islam are so successful, is that people don't investigate them, right? So if you show up and you look at this list of these 40 different things that Muhammad knew that were centuries ahead of his time, and he couldn't possibly have known. If you just look at that and you say, "Whoa, this is amazing! This truly is an amazing religion here," and people will convert based on that. For some reason, it never crosses people's minds to say, "Let me go get those sources, and I want to look up everything you just said, and I want to see it in context. I want to see the actual hadith. I want to see exactly what Muhammad said." And because once you do that, you start saying, "He didn't say that." He didn't say. You took one little phrase out of something he said and tried to turn it into an argument. When you look at the actual hadith, and everything he said in the hadith is nonsense, except for that little excerpt that you twisted to mean something else.
Yeah, I can confirm that in my own upbringing. Like I grew up in a Sufi Muslim family, in a Sufi Sunni Muslim family, and I became one myself later because I was so much impressed by Islamic sources and by Islamic preachers talking about the end times and prophecies and stuff like that. And when I think about myself back then, when I was so impressed, I saw so many end time prophecies, for example, by Muhammad, so many things that were said, and we can all see them today, and it's all miraculous. It's wonderful. But then when I started actually questioning it and reading about it, I realized that most of it is totally false. Most of it is totally misinterpreted, totally misrepresented by Islamic apologists deliberately, so that you believe in it.
Yeah, and what you just said there is very important, that it's misrepresented by Muslim apologists. And so Nabeel, when he's giving me, Nabeel he's not going to read a hadith and then twist its meaning. He's not that sort of person. What he was doing is he's reading Muslim apologist books and their spin on these passages, and then he's presenting their arguments to me as evidence for Islam. And so then it becomes me going to the actual hadith, finding where Muhammad said this, and then coming back to Nabeel with what is actually said. And so in other words, when a Muslim presents you with some bad information and you see, hey, you said this and I went and looked it up and that's not what it said at all, don't think that the Muslim was trying to trick you. That Muslim probably got that from a Muslim apologist who was twisting the passage. It's like when Muslims say Islam is a religion of peace. Don't automatically jump to he's practicing taqiyya. He might not be practicing taqiyya. He might really probably, if it's a Muslim in the West, he probably sincerely believes that Islam is a religion of peace.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so he's not trying to trick you. He's trying to correct what he regards as your false view. And so so this is a situation with Nabeel. He'd been misled by the arguments of Muslim apologists. But what was cool is, because I got his sources and started looking up the passages, I could then go back to him and say, here's what it really says. And that has a huge impact. You wouldn't see it. I didn't notice it when I was watching. It wasn't until afterwards when he would tell me that this stuff is having an impact on him. But it's basically, if you're a Muslim, you grow up. And if you don't if you don't know everything yourself, you haven't studied the Muslim sources, you look to certain authorities in your religion and say, okay, these guys are the scholars. They've studied things. They know what they're talking about. So let me rely on their arguments. Like lots of Muslims, their faith in Islam isn't based on any personal research. It's based on Zakir Naik sounding good to them.
Absolutely.
And so there's a negative to that, and there's a positive to that. The negative side is just disheartening when, you know, someone can make up a bunch of nonsense and tons of Muslims just mindlessly accept it without ever bothering to examine it. The positive side is that when Muslim apologists spout a bunch of complete nonsense and you are willing to put in the time and actually go through the sources and come back to them, then the Muslim will be looking at that and saying, wait, my Muslim apologist said this, but here's what the actual evidence is. And the actual evidence goes against what the Muslim apologist said. What that does is it starts shaking the real source of their confidence. Their real confidence was in their leaders. So once they start realizing, hey, my leaders can't completely be trusted here, then they get to a point where, hey, maybe I have to look into this for myself. Maybe I can't just accept whatever Zakir Naik says. Maybe I have to start over and start from scratch and really look into this for myself and see whether these arguments are really good or whether they're not. And once someone starts doing that sincerely, I'd say he's on his way out of Islam.
Yeah, I think it's very important what you just said. I think we should even expand that and tell about the importance of that again to the audience. I mean, the way you described people believing in Islam, like relying on the information they get from their scholars and apologists, that's really how most Muslims believe in Islam. And even if Muslims are watching us here, you probably know what we are talking about. I was the same. Many others were the same. Many other Muslims online who defend Islam to death are the same, that they don't actually go and read the Quran for themselves. They don't go and read the Hadith for themselves because the Hadith books are way too long. I don't believe that any Muslim ever does that. I haven't seen any Muslim who ever did that. What most Muslims do is just to pick a favorite Islamic scholar and say, well, this guy tells me that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did this, or that in the Quran Allah meant actually this when he said this. That's what most Muslims do. That's why, for example, something very common, if you criticize Islam online, you will see that the common Muslim reaction will be, well, you have to go to a scholar to understand that. Mm-hmm. That's how most of them think, and that's the problem. They don't even actually go into that and research it. They only believe what their scholars say. Like Zakir Naik, who's priding himself on his YouTube channel with 17 million followers or something, and he even has a big text about that he has so many subscribers. And that's how most Muslims believe, and that's the actual problem. That's why we are sitting here and talking about all these sources and how it actually is.
And just to be fair, this is true of human beings in general, right? Most human beings don't have an opportunity to go out and study everything for themselves. So we tend to trust people that we would regard as reliable. So Christians can look to their apologists or preachers as reliable. It starts off with regarding your parents as reliable, and then eventually start regarding, hey, William Lane Craig, he knows what he's talking about. If you're I've seen lots of atheists like this who, Dawkins says this, Dawkins says that, Dawkins says this, when it's clear they haven't really gone through anything that he's saying themselves. So people in general are like this. Again, most people just don't have time to go through everything themselves, so they have to rely on other people. But with Islam, it's much more intense, as you pointed out. I can point out anything. I can say, look, here's what Muhammad said. Oh, but you need to go watch Zakir Naik. Well, look, here's what your prophet said, and here's why it's wrong. Oh, well, go to Zakir Naik. What are you talking about? Look this up yourself. Look this up yourself and tell me, give me some sort of defense of this passage. What's also true is Muslims do something in reverse, right? Because they have their confidence in individuals. It's, here's this person I trust, that I've noticed, and you've probably experienced the same thing, that when you give them an argument, a lot of times they'll attack you, the person, and try to discredit you as the person, rather than showing why your argument is right or wrong. So I can give a detailed argument from the hadiths. Say, here's what Muhammad said here. Here's what he said here. And you put all this together, and here's the problem that it raises. And the response is, David's a psychopath, right? He has mental health problems. Don't believe. Wait a minute. My argument does not have mental health problems.
Yeah.
The argument doesn't. That's one premise, and here's another premise, and here's a conclusion, and it follows via this logical law. The argument doesn't have mental problems. So what are you doing? But that's what they're doing, right? Is everything is like a matter of authority to many Muslims, and so they try to attack you as a credible source. But yeah, it's a sad situation. But for Muslims who are actually open, because think about this: if you're growing up as a Muslim and you've got parents and they're good Muslims, and it's kind of built into Islam that other positions are addressed with apologetics. And what I mean there is certain criticisms of the deity of Christ are built into Islam. They're built into Islam. They're in the Quran. They're in the Hadith. So it's not just, hey, here's some argument that some Muslim came up with later. Viewing other positions as false and flawed is part of the system itself. It's emphasized in the system. And so if you attend mosque all your life, you're already going to have some arguments built into your position against other groups. Whereas, like in Christianity, if a Muslim comes up to a Christian, the Christian might know absolutely nothing about that person's position, not know how to criticize it, but certain criticisms are built into Islam. And so Muslims grow up with, if their families take it at all seriously, they grow up with a certain level of apologetics built into their minds. And eventually they pick their authorities, Zakir Naik or Didat or Yusuf Estes or something like this. They start having confidence in these other people. But if it's a Muslim who is at all open to reason, just by sitting down with the Muslim and looking at what some of these people say and going through it, you can kind of wreak havoc on this person's belief, because lots of times these guys are spouting just complete nonsense. I mean, absolute nonsense. We've played a clip before where Yusuf Estes is explaining the origins of Christianity, and he says that the Catholic Church was started by Alexander the Great in Rome, and people in the audience start, what are you talking about? It's on the Vatican's website. Go to the Vatican's website. Now, guess whatever, and you can go to the Vatican's website and look up. No, their church was not started by Alexander the Great in Rome. Wrong century. It's disheartening that people can say such idiotic stuff like, and you're laughing, right? That's what any person who has any clue about history should do. But when they say things like that, it provides an opportunity, because that is so outrageously dumb that you can sit back, a little timeline of history and show, should you be listening to this guy as your authority? Because Muslims tell me that too. You would never say this to Yusuf Estes. Yusuf Estes, that guy's a bigger joke than Zakir Naik. But yeah, so
I was just thinking here, and I was just thinking, what's going on?
Yeah. The situation, it's kind of like the situation that the Greeks were in with respect to the Persians during the time of Alexander the Great, because during the time of Philip of Macedon, travelers started coming back saying, hey, that massive Persian empire that we've gone to war with all these times, and they have this huge army? Well, guess what? They're actually really weak now. Their forts are falling apart. Their soldiers are laying around drunk. You could take one well-armed group of soldiers and you could go wreak havoc in the entire empire. One small, well-trained group. And Alexander the Great said, I'll do it. And he went and just went right through the Persian Empire. And what looked like this super powerful empire was actually really weak and was falling apart from the inside. It was deteriorating from the inside. But Islam is kind of like that in respect to their arguments. Their apologists have spread things on such ridiculously false claims for so long, because they knew that, especially in the West, people were not in a position to examine these ridiculous arguments. You weren't in a position to really examine them in the Muslim world, because if you start saying, hey, the Quran's wrong, get your head chopped off. But in the West, people just didn't have access to the sources. They didn't know where to start. Suddenly we get to our time when any one of us can start opening up books and start refuting the claims. And it's like the Persian Empire. It's spread on such nonsense that one well-trained group of internet people like you can wreak havoc on a lot of bad arguments.
Yeah. Well, what I find funny is, you just talked about how responses to other ideologies or to other religions is included in the Islamic society or the Islamic religion, for example, which reminds me of how Islam itself, the religion in its most fundamental scriptures in the Quran and the Hadith, makes so many statements, so many claims about other religions that are well alive today. Like the Quran and the Hadith talk so many times in very negative ways. You know what I mean? About Christians, about Jews, about Zoroastrians, which is not so much relevant today, but especially about Christians and Jews. And it's quite funny to me that when we talk about Islam today, and when we talk negatively about Islam and we criticize it, people say, well, this is Islamophobia. Why don't you leave us alone? But I grew up in that world, and in that world, it was quite normal to talk negatively about all the other religions, to call them kafir, to call them immorals, to call them whatever. That was quite normal. If you grow up in Turkey, you learn in your local mosque that the Western person, the Christian, the Crusader, the Jew is trying to deceive you, is kind of your enemy, and then you should overcome them with Allah's help. And here we are talking about stuff like Islamophobia.
Well, because there's a reason for that, right? So the problem you're pointing out is utter hypocrisy, right? If I say, hey, Islam is false, and here are my reasons, and you say, oh, that's Islamophobia, then one of the most helpful things to do, ladies and gentlemen, is to learn a couple of things about the history of Islam, or a couple verses from the Quran, and say, okay, if it's wrong for me, then was it wrong for Muhammad to stand outside the Kaaba and condemn the religious beliefs of the people who are gathering there for their religious festival? Because well, if you're saying it's wrong, then it would be wrong for him, right? So that can be helpful. But the reason this doesn't occur to lots of Muslims is hypocrisy is also built into the heart of Islam, right?
It is.
If the pagans say, hey, Muslims are no longer free to take the pilgrimage here to the Kaaba, that's wicked and immoral, and that's the worst thing ever. But as soon as the Muslims take over, hey, no one else gets to take the pilgrimage here ever again. And that's just, it makes perfect sense. And so
well, Muhammad, for example, said, from now on or from next year, I don't want to see any pagan dancing around the Kaaba anymore. They should be gone. That's what he did. And that's not a problem, but people telling Muslims to go away is a huge problem, and is even condemned in the Quran with Allah's words.
Yeah.
That's pure hypocrisy.
Yeah, no question. And there are tons of things like that, right? If anyone, if you criticize Muhammad, make fun of Muhammad, you had to die. But they get to, and again, I'm not even talking about Muslims now. I'm talking about during the time of Muhammad.
Yeah.
He could sit there making fun of your gods and goddesses all day long. And that's fine. Hey, let God judge in the afterlife. But as soon as you said, hey, Muhammad's a false prophet, hey, you're going to have to die if they're in a position to do something to you. And, you can ask Asma bint Marwan, or Abu Afaq, or many of the others who were killed for criticizing Islam.
Absolutely. I want to say something. I mean, it's the elephant in the room. Many people, especially many anti-theist atheists who are on my channel, who follow me occasionally, for some reason they convince themselves to follow me anyway, would ask me this simple question, which I see in the live chat too and saw before: why would I sit down with David Wood, who is a Christian apologist? And I usually try telling them that I am a former Muslim. I focus on criticizing Islam. I don't have to go out there and talk about how bad Christianity is, or how bad Judaism is, or this and that, because but the main reason I'm doing that is because I think that Islam is really a problem in our time that we have to deal with. And I myself, as a former Muslim who studied and practiced the religion thoroughly, I see myself responsible for doing that. I should be doing that. And I see that Islam is a major evil that we are standing before in our times. And I believe, as far as I can see from looking at your channel, that you share these thoughts to some extent. So we talked about hypocrisy in Islam, we talked about the lack of knowledge in Islam, and so on. But what would you say about that Islam is currently one of the biggest problems in our world? Would you agree with that? How would you agree with that? And how would you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about the situation, you've got an ideology that calls for the violent subjugation of the entire world. Right? Muhammad was shown a vision where Muslims ruled the entire world. And there's a method in place for how you achieve that. You are faithful to Allah. And when you're in a position to subjugate the unbelievers, you subjugate the unbelievers. When you're not in a position to subjugate the unbelievers, you promote peace and tolerance until you are in a position to subjugate them. So you've got an ideology. Now, to be clear, you can be part of all kinds of ideologies and still have that same mindset. Some people, personality-wise, I have to go out and just destroy everyone else. So, you know, you can be an atheist and want atheism to dominate the world. You can be a Christian and want Christianity to dominate the world. But it's not built into these systems, right? It's not built into these systems that you go out and you subjugate the entire world. You can find people who held that view. You can find entire nations who hold these kinds of views, but it's not built into the system. In Islam, it's built into the system. So it combines a normal psychological framework that certain people have. Certain people have that mindset. But Islam says, oh, yeah, and that's exactly what God wants you to do. You are under compulsion from God to go out and subjugate the entire world. Now, that would be one thing if there were like 8 Muslims in the world, right? But you've got around 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. And everywhere you can actually do statistics on it, Muslims have the highest birth rates. In Europe, Muslims have the highest birth rates of every group you can think of.
Yeah.
So anywhere you go, anywhere Pew Research has been able to do studies, they found out that of all the groups you can list, Muslims have the highest birth rates. And so in Islam, you've got the highest birth rates. And not only do you have the highest birth rates, you have pretty serious psychological blockers to leaving Islam. So at least now, I'm hoping this is not the same in the future, but at least now, most people are going to remain Muslim. So you've got the highest birth rates. You've already got 1.6 billion people, or roughly a fifth of the world's population. And you're the fastest growing due primarily to high birth rates. And we've seen over and over again, yes, you can have tons of peaceful Muslims who don't take the commands to wage jihad seriously, but for some reason, there is always a significant percentage of the Muslims who take it very seriously. And that's why as soon as some guy in the Middle East says, hey, I'm the new caliphate, you'll have Muslims fleeing from France, from the UK, from the United States, from all over the world, where guess what? They grew up in a Western nation, learning the same things that the rest of us learn, and yet as soon as the call is raised, they're ready to go. That means they already had that idea. They were just waiting for the opportunity. So they're waiting. So you have that sort of thing, and it's growing. You look anywhere Islam becomes dominant, and people get subjugated. Whether you're atheist, whether you're Christian, whether you're a minority Muslim sect in the area, you're going to have a very, very rough time. And so I would say it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense to be concerned about this ideology as at least one of the biggest threats that we would have to deal with in the world. Because the difference between Islam and other things is once you go Islam, you almost never go back. And I don't mean in terms of conversion. I mean once an area is subjugated by Islam, very rare and very bloody for it to go back to being non-Islamic. Things that become Islamic tend to stay Islamic because you're not free. You're not free to jump up and start having disagreements. And so going back to what you were pointing out, because by the way, that I haven't looked at the comments, but there are Christians who will say the same thing, like, "Hey, what are you doing on this guy's channel?" or something like that. And I'm saying that because in the past, like if I posted I don't know if you know Pat Condell's videos.
Yeah.
So I would post a Pat Condell video where he's making some brilliant, witty point. And I would post that, and they would say, but he's an atheist. And I say, yeah, I know, but he's right. What he said here is correct. He makes videos attacking Christianity. Yeah, but what he said here is correct. What he said here is correct. So I'm fine with what he said here. But yeah, that because you and me were talking about before the live stream that I have a lot of atheist subscribers. And you have these kind of two camps, the hey, we're against all religion, in the sense that we treat it all equally. It's all on the same. It's all on the same level for us. It all has to be. It all has to be done away with, or we're through. Science is going to come to an end if we don't do something, right? Science is just going to roll to a stop if we don't stop the Christians, right? So you have those kind of atheists, and they don't want any sort of they don't want anything like this, because it might normalize people like me instead of, you know, regarding us as moral. But then you have the people who are more, you know, I'm guessing like us. Hey, you know, we have our disagreements. You know, I think you're wrong, you think I'm wrong, but we at least agree that we don't want to be dominated by Islam. That people need to be protected from Islamic law. And, you know, I don't see why you can't, as a Christian, say, hey, you know, Raif Badawi, he shouldn't have been treated like that, and we need to put pressure on Muslim leaders to stop doing things like that. I don't see why, as an atheist, you can't say, you know, look what's happening to Christians in Pakistan or in Egypt. They shouldn't be treated like that. And so, by the way, I've gotten in trouble with this before, because I posted comments from Muslims who left us. They send me a message and they say, "Hey, David, thank you for helping me leave Islam." And it turns out they're actually atheists now. So some Muslims, here again, you have kind of two categories. Some Muslims leave Islam, but even though they reject Muhammad, they still believe in God. They still believe in Jesus. They just reject Muhammad. So the next step is Christianity, right? So it's not Buddhism or Hinduism or something like that. Those are very rare to see a Muslim convert to something like that. But if you are just rejecting Muhammad, I've come to regard Muhammad as a false prophet. Well, Christianity seems like the next step from there. Or you have Muslims who, they find out that Islam is false and they just don't trust religion anymore. Why would I trust Christianity? Christianity is in a similar boat in terms of people believing a bunch of nonsense and so on. So they become atheists, and so they go these two routes. But people point out, David, some Muslims watch your videos and then become atheists. And I'm glad that they've rejected Islam. And they say, yeah, but they become atheists, so they're still they're still lost. And I think, you know, what they don't get is you can view things as a dual problem, right? You can say Islam is a problem with respect to Christianity because it's keeping people from the gospel. You can see that. But you can also say, and apart from that, there's this other problem, namely that Islam calls for the violent subjugation of the entire world, and wherever it takes wherever it takes hold, human rights go down the drain. And as a Christian, I should be concerned about that as well. I should be concerned about the treatment of anyone. We're told, seek the good of all people, right? We seek the good of all people. That doesn't just mean the gospel, right? If someone's bashing your head in, even if you're going to be an atheist for the rest of your life, I should at least, you know, try to help you out and stop someone from bashing your head in. So you've got this situation where, like, if a Muslim in Saudi Arabia sends me a message saying he's left Islam and that he's now an atheist, I say, oh, cool, right? And there are lots of Christians who say, no, he's still lost. Well, they don't seem to understand. Like, imagine a world where tons of people in Saudi Arabia became atheists. And it got to a point where so many people became atheists that the government had to change and no longer violently subjugated and oppressed dissenting views. And now there was actually freedom of speech.
It would be amazing for everyone.
Yeah. So that would be good for, even if you're completely selfish and the only thing you're concerned about is the status of Christians in the world, that would be good for Christians too. So that's why, you know, I believe atheism is false. But if we're talking about things we're worried about in the world, I'm much more worried about the spread of Islam than the spread of atheism.
I believe you even had a discussion with a Christian minister recently about that, right? Am I wrong? That about your methods, that you don't directly invite people to Christianity and so on. I think I saw that a little bit.
Yeah, well, no, I do invite people to Christianity, right? I have tons of views. It's just, I'll invite someone to Christianity when I'm inviting someone to Christianity. If I'm talking about philosophy of science, I'm going to talk about philosophy of science. If I'm talking about why Muhammad's a false prophet, I'm going to talk about why he's a false prophet. I'm talking about, hey, Muhammad's command to wipe with an odd number of stones is just absolutely ridiculous. To me, it kind of degrades the gospel of, oh, and on the end of telling you that it's ridiculous to say you have to wipe with an odd number of stone, like why odd? What is the point here? In addition to telling you that, I'm going to tack a gospel message onto the end of it. I don't know. That's just weird. Right? Yeah. Like there can't be any focusing on a topic at hand. Because I'll even have that if the debate is on the existence of God, right? So there will be a debate on the existence of God, and I will argue that God exists, and someone will say, "Ha, there are Christians who will come up after us. Ha, but you didn't show that Jesus is Lord and He rose from the dead." That kind of wasn't the topic there, right? Can I answer a question, yes or no? And so, yeah, there's you got to we understand where they're coming from, but sometimes you just disagree.
Yeah, some people expect this absolute partisanship of you. I mean, I have the same thing on my channel. I have many, very many Christian viewers, many Hindu viewers, also many atheist viewers, and I don't have a problem with that. I even made a video about that, saying that that's beautiful. I don't have an interest in dividing people even further just because I'm here talking about Islam, just because I chose not to belong to any religion after that. I don't have to push all the Christians aside from my channel. I don't have to push all the Hindus off my channel. They can all stay here. Why would I bother about that? I'm focusing here about Islam. I'm focusing here on Islam because Islam is a main problem, and I'm a former Muslim. Just because I don't believe in any God now, I don't have to go out there and say that all religions are equally bad, that the belief in God is completely dangerous and it will destroy our world and they will come after you and whatever. I don't have to play those games. And I can talk about Islam completely without directing people to something different instead, without telling them to stay away from Christianity. Also, I mean, I have so many people on my channel. I have seen them on your channel. So many people told me, although I'm not a Christian, that they left Islam with my help, but they became Christians. Now, why would I have a problem with that? That person won't go out and try to recruit people and try to blow himself up in the middle of London or whatever, or New York, whatever. I'm totally fine with that. And some people somehow expect this, that we are absolutists about what we do here, but I don't understand why we should ever do that. I think we can have a brilliant conversation, you and I together, about the danger of Islam, about what we can do on it. And that's perfectly fine. We can have different beliefs. We can have completely different opinions about the world and all, but we can still come together and talk about this, which is great to see. And here I want to go into another thing, which is something that I talk about with everyone that I talk to, which is reforming Islam. I made very recently a video about this. My last video, I believe, is about whether reforming Islam is possible or not. And I would like to ask you about that. What do you think about the future of Islam? Do you think it can be reformed? Do you think reforming Islam would even be good? What do you think about that?
I think you can reform Muslims. I don't see how you can reform Islam, right?
Absolutely.
If you were to reform it, it would no longer be Islam. So Islam wouldn't be reformed. You just changed it into something else. But I mean, the word Islam means submission, yeah. And so that's the core of Islam. You are submitting to Allah, but Islam tells you how you have to submit to Allah, and you submit to Allah by unquestioningly obeying the commands of Allah in the Quran and the teachings and example of Muhammad in the Hadith. In chapter 4, verse 65 of the Quran says, you are not a Muslim. You have no real faith unless you accept all of Muhammad's decisions and have no resistance in yourself against them. So if Muhammad makes a decision about something and you say, hey, Muhammad is wrong, or hey, maybe I have to reinterpret this, then you are, according to the Quran, no longer a real Muslim. Now you can do things out of ignorance. You reject something out of ignorance, but if you're actually trying deliberately to change the interpretations of Islam, you'd be in trouble as far as the Quran is concerned, and you'd be in trouble with Muhammad. Innovation is one of the worst possible sins in Islam. That's coming up with your own way of doing something or your own belief about something.
Yeah, bid'ah. It's very, yeah. There's even a term for that.
Yeah. So that's that's a one-way ticket to hell. Muhammad said all innovators will go to hell. Yeah. So it's not actually it's not built into the religion to have that kind of ability to change. And by the way, part of the problem here, is with people's understanding of the history of Christianity, right? They look at Christianity, and they had all those wars, Catholics and Protestants fighting over all these things, but they grew out of that. Therefore, Islam can too. And I've seen atheists who are somewhat sympathetic, pointing this out. Hey, other religions have gone through this process, and they're violent for a while, and then they can be brought out of it. So they can have that kind of reformation. Why can't Islam? And they don't seem to realize that it's not built in. It's not part of Christianity, right? It's condemned in Christianity. Peter pulls out his sword. Jesus tells him, put it back in its place. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Christians are told, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. So the goal is peace. You can have people, once they get in control, want to maintain that control. I don't know of any group that doesn't try to maintain control once it starts maintaining control, or also try to further the extent of their control when they have the opportunity. But so you can point to Christians down through history who are waging war and things, but it's not in the system. So abandoning that, you're not changing the religion. You're not changing the religion. You're changing the way people, what people do about the religion, or how they act with their religion. In Islam, it's actually the violent subjugation of the entire world is built into the system. And so when you say, well, we're no longer going to do that, then you're saying, well, we're not obeying the Muslim sources anymore. We're just going to reject those. We're gonna keep our belief in Allah. We're gonna do our daily prayers. We're still gonna take our pilgrimage. We're still gonna give alms. We're still gonna fast during Ramadan. But all that jihad stuff, well, you can do that, and lots of Muslims do that. But the same God who commands you to recite the Shahada also commands you to fight those who do not believe in Allah.
That's the fundament of Islam. I mean, the fundamentals of Islam order you to spread Islam by any means, by the sword. And those who practice jihad are higher than anyone else. That's part of the fundamentals of Islam.
Yeah. So people think Islam can be reformed because they've seen other things being reformed, but they don't understand that when you're talking about reform in other religions, you're not talking about changing the fundamental characteristics. You're talking about changing the people. And so that's why I said, yes, you can change Muslim people. You can change Muslim people, but the ideology is so tied into this idea of submission and unquestioning obedience to the commands of Allah and Muhammad, that as soon as you change that, then you've just formed some offshoot of Islam that is no longer Islam. And if there are people who are actually still within Islam, those commands are still going to be there.
I pointed it out in my video. I mean, people misunderstand the definition of reform very much if they when they talk about Christianity and Islam. In the history of Christianity, for example, reform was more of the understanding of reform was to go back to pure Christianity and to live Christianity and take it out of those who corrupt it. I mean, take it out of the hands of those who corrupt it. Now, if you want to apply that to Islam, you would go back to fundamental Islamism, which is practiced in Saudi Arabia or among terrorists today.
By the way, that's exactly what the Salafis are doing, right? So
yeah, that's what I mean.
So if we're talking about a reformation, because you can talk about reforming a religion in different ways, right? Anytime it's in one form and it's taking on a different form, then so if you say, hey, Christians during the Middle Ages were fighting wars and so on, and they're not doing that anymore, you can say, it's been reformed in that sense. If you're thinking of something like the Protestant Reformation, when they're saying, hey, there are all these, you can't be paying to do away with your sins or something like that. You can't. That's not from the Scripture. That kind of Reformation, yeah, there are Muslims who are the Islamic equivalent of Martin Luther, but they're Salafis, right?
Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, for example, is
They're the guys they're the guys you're saying are not Muslims at all. Those are the reformers. And by the way, there's a reason for that. You see, after the Ottoman Empire fell, after the Ottoman Empire is conquered by Western nations, lots of Muslim nations started adopting like Western systems. I mean, again, you can look at Iran or certain other Muslim countries in the 50s and 60s. They dressed just like they did in the United States, right? And part of it was, hey, we had this view that our religion is superior, and meanwhile, all these Western nations just blew right by us. And so now they're stronger, they're more prosperous, they're more powerful. This had a psychological impact on people that maybe we need to start adopting their way of doing things because, like it or not, they just blew right by us. So that's one way of regarding that. One way of seeing what happened, the decline in power of the Western world. I mean, of the Islamic world and the rise of the West is that Islam is just wrong. Islam's just got some things wrong. That's one way of doing it. But there's an alternative. The alternative is Allah isn't blessing us anymore because we've become a bunch of compromisers. And so the reason we've been conquered is the reason other nations are now more powerful and more prosperous than us is because we haven't taken Islam seriously enough. And if we want Allah to bless us again so that we can go out and fulfill our mission of subjugating the entire world to Islam, then we need to become more devout. We need to crack down on compromisers. And that happened in the Sunni world and happened in the Shia world, right? That happened in the Sunni world with the Muslim Brotherhood, Salafis, and so on, and it happened in the Shia world, right? Look at Iran. They both had the exact same reaction. Wait, either Islam is wrong, or Allah just isn't blessing us because we haven't been strict enough. In
Iran, that was the main message, that we need to go back to obeying Allah again because that's why we are weak. Yeah. That was the main motivator behind the revolution in Iran. And now see how it looks.
So these are the reformers, right? These are the reformers. Yeah. We go back to the basics if we want Allah to bless us.
Yeah. The same thing is also happening it is still happening in many countries. I mean, you could still argue that that Islamic revivalism is going on around the Islamic world. It's even happening in Turkey. My parents are from Turkey. I spent over a decade there, and even there, Ataturk, the founder of the Turkish Republic, built a republic and focused mainly on progress, on the West, on adopting Western values and making this country a better place for everyone, not only for Muslims, not only for men. And but now, in the last decades, Islamists have more and more gained influence in the government and have started to propagate this return to Islam, this revivalism. And Erdogan, for example, the president of Turkey, is a result of that. That's how Islamic reform looks like. Islamic reform doesn't mean you become better and adapt to your times. It means that you go back and become totally bad and backwards.
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. I have seen that you objected in the past about to the burning of the Quran. I've seen, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that. It's maybe not such an interesting question. I'm very sorry, but what do you think about that?
What, the burning of the Quran?
Yes, I think you objected to someone burning the Quran. You thought that's not the right thing to do.
It would depend on the circumstances. There, it's a pastor saying that this is going to be our new form of protest to Islam. We're gonna be burning Quran. So actually, I debated him. I had a debate on whether this is the route you want to go, because I understand. I mean, you can tell from my videos, I don't have many qualms about making fun of Muhammad or things like that. It's, do you really want this to be your method of criticism, right? I understand blasting away, but if you look, while I'm making fun of Muhammad, there's always a point there. There's a point. I'm making fun of Muhammad about some silly thing that he's done, and so I'm pointing out that the whatever I'm doing, it's to make some sort of point. Whereas the burning a Quran, it's like, my goodness, do you really want to go? Do we want to be book burners? Do we want to be the modern book burners? And by the way, it's a different situation if someone who if some woman who's been brutalized by Islam wants to leaves Islam, and then as a means, I'm showing you where I stand now, and burns the Quran, I have no problem with that. It's with this idea of sort of Western pastors and stuff now jumping into there. It's, come on, guys, we can do something better than that.
Yeah, I would agree with you that pushes Muslims completely away from the conversation, from the discussion. If a Western person, or if more and more Western people gather and start burning the Quran, but if former Muslims do that, that sends a big message across the world. It's good that you make a difference there. Another thing that I want to ask is, you're a Christian, and you know that there are many fundamental mistakes in the Quran about the Bible, about Christianity, about biblical figures, about Jesus, about Mary, and so on. Now, many people would wonder, many people do wonder, how did that happen? How did Muhammad's Quran contain complete mistakes about Jesus or about Mary? What do you think about that? How did it even come to that?
Well, there are a couple of possibilities here. The Roman Emperor Justinian, I believe it was Justinian, expelled heretics from the Roman Empire. So if you're heretical, if you have heretical views, you need to get out. And some of them went to the Middle East. Some of the people with heretical sects went to the Middle East. So you could say that Muhammad got certain things wrong because he's talking to people who are a bit off. But I don't think that does a good enough job, because Muhammad got things wrong that you can't find anyone in history, not even heretics, who held to certain positions. So, for instance, in Judaism, that the claim that Jews found Ezra as the son of God. You can't find any Jew who says that Ezra is the son of God in any sense different from saying that we're all sons of God, or that Jews are sons of God. There's no record of anyone like that, which, you could say, hey, there was this guy who lived down the street from Muhammad who said it. We have no records of him, but maybe he's referring to them. But this is Allah's eternal word here, right? This is the eternal word of Allah. This isn't
all of humanity.
Yeah. So you'd expect him to be dealing with the main positions, not some guy who lived down the street from Muhammad. And so when Islam is getting just basic things wrong, like not understanding the Trinity, not understanding what Jews believe, not understanding what Christians believe, getting material from all of these sources where we know that the sources are not reliable. We know where the information comes from. The problem this presents for Muslims is, if Islam really comes from Muhammad, if the Quran was really composed by Muhammad and then written down by his followers, I understand Muhammad not understanding the doctrine of the Trinity. I understand him misunderstanding it. I understand a 7th century Arab caravan trader hearing Christians refer to God the Father and Jesus the Son and Mary the mother of Jesus, and hearing the word Trinity and thinking, okay, what they believe is a Trinity made up of Allah, Mary, and Jesus, this little holy family that works together as kind of one. Well, that sounds silly. Great, Christians would think that sounds silly too. So I would understand Muhammad misunderstanding that. I don't understand God misunderstanding that, right? I don't understand God getting it wrong. In other words, if God is going to correct us and say, hey, you have a false belief, we would at least expect him to know what the belief is that he's responding to. Because and by the way, for those who don't know what we're talking about, read chapter 5, verse 116 of the Quran. It's where in chapter 5, you're told, don't believe that Christian nonsense about the Trinity. And then you get to the closest the Quran ever comes to giving a description of the Trinity, and it's Allah, Jesus, and Mary, and which no Christians believe. But what that does is, there are two basic possibilities here. If you're saying that comes from God, there are two possibilities. Either Allah doesn't know what the doctrine of the Trinity is, in which case he's ignorant, or he does know what it is and he deliberately misrepresented it, in which case he's deceptive. And so he's ignorant or he's deceptive. Take your pick, because it's one or the other when you start getting these things wrong about what Christianity and Judaism teach. The same thing with Ezra as the son of Allah. Either Allah doesn't know what Jews are claiming, or he does know, and he's making that false claim about them in order to justify jihad against them. But it's one or the other. And if you're a Muslim, I would go with the deceptive. I would go with that to reconcile your theology.
I had a major discussion with a number of Muslims only recently, because I made this video about, I made two videos in which I pointed out such mistakes. One was about the Ezra issue. The other was about the Trinity, about how the Quran talks of Christians taking Mary as their God, and the Quran says it in one part explicitly, and in another part it makes a reference to that. And I got into this discussion with Muslims who told me that there was indeed a sect back in Arabia in the, I don't know, at some time, who were called Collyridians. And I even pointed it out in my video before I even went into a discussion with them about it. The funny thing is that Collyridians are referred to in only one document ever in history by a bishop, and Collyridians are described as a sect who believed that Mary was somehow divine, that Mary was a deity. But the ridiculousness about this is that even if that was true, even if such a sect ever existed, that sect didn't even make up 1% of the Christian population in that time, let alone in the entire time of Christians being alive. So it's completely ridiculous to say that Allah in that Quran verse refers to that little tiny group of heretics in Arabia who did indeed believe that Mary was also God.
Well, by the way, I mean, think about the actual passage, right? In chapter 5, verse 116, it's Allah at the future judgment saying to Jesus, right? Jesus, did you give this belief to people? And Jesus saying, no, I didn't give that belief to. I mean, it seems like he would have gone with the big one, and right, with the big heresy, and not, you know, some insignificant sect that no one's ever heard of, and people really don't know what they even believed, and trying to refute that, right? So, yeah. So we're getting to the end of time, and hey, Jesus, I've been meaning to ask you about that ancient weird sect that we know nothing about, no one cares about. The main Christian groups, I don't care about them. I don't care about Orthodox Christianity at all. I wanted to ask you about Collyridians, you know.
Well, some people even say that that the Quran verse is right because it refers to Catholics who somehow, you know, who venerate Mary, and that could be described as worship. But the Quran doesn't say that. The Quran explicitly says, "Did you tell to the people to take me and my mother as deities beside Allah?" Sorry, no Christian does that.
Catholics wouldn't say that. Catholics wouldn't.
Yeah. So absolutely, and that's another example of how many Muslims, Muslim apologists make these totally unresearched and illogical claims just to defend religion. But if you look at the Quran verse alone, and there is even a Quran verse that supports, for example, if I'm not wrong, that supports the example of Ezra, for example. There's even a hadith that mentions that same thing again. In that hadith, Muhammad tells about the day of judgment, and he says that Allah will gather the different groups, and he will gather the Jews and will ask them what they believed in, and the Jews will say, "We believed in Ezra, the son of Allah." So the hadith makes it even further clear that Muhammad apparently believed that Jews believe Ezra is the son of God. But
notice again there. So because I brought up what the Quran says with Shabir Ali, and he said maybe it was just. I think he said. People can correct me if I'm wrong if they saw the debate, but I think Shabir Ali said, well, this could have been just referring to one person. But think about that, because Muhammad is considered the top interpreter of the Quran. So if Muhammad is talking about what's going to happen on, you know, at the judgment, stuff like that, and it's the Jews who are making this claim. Notice again, here you're talking about the end of time. This is what the Jews are going to be brought forth saying. And so it's just odd that the big questions that are going to rise on the day of judgment are these little insignificant groups that no one's ever heard of that just happen to be somehow important to Muhammad. And for some reason, Muslims just can't see this problem because they don't understand. They have to grasp their own view of inspiration of Scripture, right? It's different from a Christian view. It would make sense for Matthew or Mark or Luke or John to be thinking of some particular group that's relevant during their time and might not be relevant later on. Because these are human authors. We believe they're inspired by God, but Matthew is just sitting down to write Matthew. He's not. This isn't a dictation theory. It's not. I'm being dictated a book from God right now. Matthew is sitting down and writing what he knows, and we believe that he's inspired to do so. So it makes sense for a biblical writer to be writing about some group of his time or something like that. But if you're talking about the Quran, this is Allah's eternal word. Allah sees all eternity, and he has all eternity to get his book exactly the way he wants. And he's just not getting basic things right. And Muslims have to jump through some hoops and incorporate a lot of speculation about why he's referring to beliefs that people just don't hold, right? You have to completely speculate. Maybe there was a Jew who lived down the street from Muhammad who held that belief, or maybe he's referring to a Jew from some other group who held this belief, and we just don't have that anymore. Well, that would make sense if Muhammad is the author. In other words, if Muslims came up with a different view of inspiration, where Muhammad is just commenting and writing poems on the times that he's in, but Allah's inspiring him because Allah's going to draw a moral message out of this somehow, a religious message out of Muhammad's views. If they held that, then you could you can understand it. But if given their view of inspiration, just doesn't make sense with what we read in the Quran, and the Muslim justifications of these texts don't make sense in light of their view of inspiration.
I believe it's very hard for Muslims to actually get behind that and to have a free mind and to look at such Quran verses and such hadith with an open mind without believing that it's the perfect word. Because I believe I can tell you that Islamic indoctrination, Islamic fear that you are taught when you are a child is much bigger than any form of religious teaching anywhere in the world. I mean, that's what I would argue, and I think many former Muslims would agree with me on that. Because in Islam, you even have this thing that Muhammad is the perfect person, the perfect human being. Everything he did was perfect. Everything he did was beautiful, and you have to follow his every step. I mean, do you think that's unique to Islam, that that you are so obligated to copy the main figure of the religion? I feel like it is, and I feel like that's very dangerous to the world.
Oh yes, I mean you have in Christianity that you're supposed to follow the example of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That means things like selfless love and laying down your life for others and things like that. We're not talking about how he ate or something like that. That's not what we mean. But in Islam, that's exactly what it means. You have to imitate Muhammad in how he went to the bathroom and how he ate. And you watch endless Muslim videos. It has to be these three fingers. It's not just with the hand, it's with the three fingers. You have to use the three fingers because these are the three fingers that Muhammad used, not with this hand, and these three fingers. And they'll explain it. It's because Muhammad. But I mean, that chapter 33, verse 21 of the Quran says that Muhammad is a beautiful pattern of conduct for Muslims. And so Muhammad's a pattern of conduct according to Allah. And then you combine that with what we mentioned earlier, chapter 4, verse 65, that you can't have any resistance against any of Muhammad's decisions. And what has happened in the Muslim world is, hey, we need to be as safe as possible and to get in as good with God as we possibly can. We need to imitate him as much as we possibly can in every way, even if it makes no sense.
The thing is, you can't even get out of that if you are a Muslim. It's very hard what we are dealing with. You can't go to Muslims and explain all these things and kind of make them easily understand that is ridiculous. When I was a Muslim, especially when I was a very religious Muslim, it was beautiful for me to to avoid laying on my stomach, for example, or to lay a specific way and to sleep like that, in the embryo position, and so on. And it looks beautiful to you when you are a Muslim and you are indoctrinated with that all your life, that you don't even get behind that. It looks beautiful to eat what Muhammad ate, to open the door of the toilet with the right hand or whatever. It's ridiculous. It's ludicrous.
And this is part of the reason. It's part of the reason that devout Muslims have a problem with with integration into Western societies, because you're always going to be you're always going to have a different way of doing things, and so on.
Okay, I wanted to ask you some more little questions. I think we're getting more and more to the end here. One thing that I'm very curious about, your Islamicize Me series. Were some elements of that series based on a TV show?
No, why? Is there a TV show that?
No, I don't know. Some things just sounded quite similar to a TV show.
No, it was that kind of the name. There was a documentary called Supersize Me, where this guy Morgan Spurlock, he went around and ate nothing but McDonald's food for 30 days to see the impact it would have on him, and it messed him up. It messed him up. He gained a bunch of weight, and he was having doctors monitor the impacts these things had on him. And I think it took him like a year and a half to recover from the damage of that 30 days. So the message was, hey, you know, try to eat healthy. But I had come up with the idea. So I wasn't thinking of that when I came up with, you know, someone needs to act these things out. This was back in the day. So I thought of this like maybe 2009, 2010 of acting out some of the teachings of Muhammad, just to stick in people's minds, right? Because you can read, and Muhammad taught his father, you know, women have to breastfeed adult men in order to rule them out as sexual partners and stuff. You know, you can read that and think, oh, that's weird. And I've never met anyone who didn't think, oh, that's weird. But to actually see it so that it's seared in your brain, I thought someone needs to do that at some point. But then when I was discussing doing it later with Vocab Malone and John McCrae, I was talking to Vocab and I said, it's like that show, it's like that documentary, Supersize Me. And he goes, oh, let's call it Islamicize Me. And I was like, oh, that's perfect, Islamicize Me. And so, yeah, we stuck with that.
I think it's a great project. I think everyone who hasn't watched it should go over to David Wood's channel and watch it. I would say especially Muslims should watch it, because I think it's a very great way to criticize Islam, because it's I mean, it gives you laughs. It makes it look really ridiculous, but also stays on topic. You know, yeah. I like the finger licking thing, for example. That was very nice.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I got a message from a woman who was showing them to her Shia friends. She has Shia Muslim friends, and so the first one she showed them was the one where John, one of the characters in, John McCrae, he's playing a Muslim, and we find out one day that he's a Shia, and so we start torturing him throughout the episode until he says that he was just lying, and until he said, yeah, he was just pretending, he was just pulling a practical joke on us. Then when we walk away, he explains what taqiyya is. And she showed that to Shias just because, you know, Shias are thinking, yes, that's what we've had to go through historically, pretending to be Sunnis just because, you know, to avoid being persecuted by Sunnis. But then she started showing them the other ones, and lots of the things in the video are based on Sunni hadiths, because that's just the dominant position. And so she was saying that Shia Muslims were finding this hilarious. So Shia Muslims tend to like most of Islamicize Me, unless we're making fun of something that comes from the Quran.
I didn't expect that. Another thing that I noticed on your channel, which was very interesting to me, is something that you called, I believe you called, the Islamic dilemma. Did you create that?
No, there are people who have pointed out, there are people who've written entire books going through, they're usually like, you know, between 30 and 100 years ago. But a lot of the Christians who started looking into the Muslim sources before it became popular, you know, like after 9/11, they were putting together books saying it's a problem in the Muslim world that Muslims think the Bible's been corrupted when the Quran over and over again does nothing but affirm the book that Christians and Jews use. So they were pointing that out as a problem. It was actually Sam Shamoun who presented it to me in the form of a dilemma. He said it, and he's the one who called it the Islamic dilemma. But he said, you know, there are two possibilities here. We have the Word of God, or we don't have the Word of God. If we have the Word of God, it's Islam is false because Islam contradicts our book. If we don't have the Word of God, Islam is false because Islam affirms the book that we have. So either way, Islam is false. I modified it a little in terms of emphasizing that the Quran affirms inspiration, preservation, and authority. Because when I started presenting it like that, I mean the original way, people would say, oh, "Of course we affirm your book, but it was corrupted later." So the Quran is affirming this original book, not this later book. And so I just reworded it a bit to say the Quran affirms the inspiration and preservation and authority of Jewish and Christian scriptures. Because if you read the verses, it's clear. It's going on to affirm not just the initial inspiration, but the preservation and authority. And so once you point that out, then you can state it in a way that's less open to an easy, simple, false response. So you say, okay, if I have the inspired, preserved, authoritative word of God, Islam is false. If I don't have the inspired, preserved, authoritative word of God, Islam is false. Either way, Islam is false. And notice that those are the two possibilities there. And so it doesn't, using that argument doesn't depend on believing the Bible, because, an atheist could say, okay, the Quran affirms these Christian scriptures. So if the Christian scriptures are the word of God, Islam is false. If the Christian scriptures aren't the word of God, as I, the atheist, believe, then Islam is false. So Islam is false. And so that's just what happens when you affirm scriptures that completely contradict some of your core claims.
I just want to give short context here in simple words. In Islam, you are brought up believing that that the Torah and the Gospel, so it is stated that way in the Quran, were revealed by God, by the same God, by Allah, but later Muslims teach you that the Torah and the Gospel that Christians and Jews have today are not valid and real books because they were corrupted by Christians and Jews, which is why you should not read them. I mean, you are openly discouraged from reading them if you grew up as a Muslim. So on one side, the Quran says that those are the words of Allah too, but on the other hand, because those books contradict very heavily with the Quran, Muslims also teach each other that those books were corrupted at a different time by Christians and Jews. And David Wood on his channel made a very great video about that, in which he gave very nice, very logical reasoning. And it's very open, it's very mind-opening, because if you grew up as a Muslim, you are very firm, you're very firmly believing that the Bible is completely false and completely corrupted by human hands, by those Christians and Jews who didn't want to follow their religion properly anymore. But if you actually go further into studying those books when you are a Muslim, you find out that there is something wrong with that narrative that Islam tells you. That's also what happened to me when I was about to leave Islam, for example. And yeah, as said, your video about that was very great, and I would recommend everyone to watch that, especially if they come from a Muslim background.
Yeah, and looking into the history of Islam is relevant there as well, because the early Muslim commentators, they said that Christians and Jews misinterpret and misapply their scriptures and distort their scriptures. But so it's the interpretation and the speech about the scriptures that's corrupted. It's not the scriptures that have been corrupted. And it was later Muslims, it was later Muslim commentators who, eventually became familiar with what's actually in the Torah and the Gospel, who started saying, no, it's the scriptures that have been corrupted. But you could read the Quran if you just raised someone with the ability to read and locked him in a room and said, just read this Quran over and over again. Don't read the Bible, just read the Quran. Don't listen to any Muslims, just read the Quran and tell me, what do you think about the books of the Jews and the Christians? They would walk out and say, those books are as good as gold for Jews and Christians. They just need to stop misinterpreting them, stop distorting them, and do what their books say. What their books say is going to line up perfectly with the Quran.
They're very well said. That's yeah, totally agreed. Okay, I think we have come to an end in our conversation. It's been 2 hours. Do you want to announce something for later this week? Do we have? Oh yeah,
Thursday. So yeah, we're talking about me most of the time here, but Thursday, what did we say? 7 o'clock Eastern time?
Yes, I believe.
Yeah, 7 o'clock Eastern time. I will be interviewing you via live stream over on my channel. So so everyone watch that, because I'll be interviewing you about your background and sharing that with the viewers.
Yeah, if you believe David Wood was talking too much here on my channel, just watch me talking on his channel. All right, I believe that's it. If you have any last words where people can follow you, where people can find you, and what you will do in the future about your channel, I believe you are a bit inactive right now because you're moving, right?
Yeah, we moved. We've been setting back up, but I think I'll probably get back to posting videos probably tomorrow. I have one on how to end prison radicalization that I want to post. I know how to end prison radicalization. You know that?
Really?
Prison radicalization. You see, they take someone like Anjem Chowdhury and they say, "Hey, he's been promoting jihad. Let's send him to prison." And what's he do in prison? He promotes jihad, right? He convinces all the young people there that they need to go out and wage jihad. So that seems like a horrible problem. What are we going to do about that? Well, good friend D. Wood, he knows.
I am excited. So is everyone else. All right. Thank you so much, David, for joining me on my channel. Thanks for a great conversation. I believe it was very fruitful. And we'll see each other again in 2 days anyway. If everyone here could join us over there, everyone, please, no exceptions. We'll have a great talk again on Thursday. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for all the great comments. I have been following a bit. We'll be together again, and I will have another video tomorrow on my channel, by the way, for everyone who's interested. Thank you so much. And bye. Stay away from Islam. I have to say that on my channel, David. Stay away from Islam.